In this video, I just want to talk briefly about some generalities with quadruped walks before we actually move on to working on quadruped cycles. Let's start out by taking a really simple look at things. So for instance here, you've got the analogue of a biped walk cycle, right? You've got two legs and they go tick-tock, back and forth in opposition to one another, like this. Pretty straightforward and simple. The quadruped walk, of course, introduces another two legs. And of course, what's going to be important in the quadruped cycle is the timing and the tick-tock between them. What we see here is the most common model that you will see presented of the quadruped walk cycle. Notice, of course, that the legs from front to rear oppose one another. So when the right front leg goes back, the left front leg is coming forwards, and vice versa on the left side there. So you get this double ticking action between the two pairs of legs like this. They just work across one another in opposition from front to back. It's as if you've got one biped walking behind the other with the phase step exactly one half of a cycle out. Now, common though this is a presentation for the very basic mechanic of the quadruped walk cycle, it's actually not that common in many quadrupeds at all. What we can play with, if we want to have a play, is with the actual sync in these timings between one another. So I'm just going to grab the rear pair of legs here, and I'm going to shift their timing along like this. You'll see, of course, that if I bring them all the way over here, then you've got this direct timing on each side. Both of the left legs go forwards together, both of the right legs go forward together. Generally, of course, seen as not very common and pretty wrong, but actually it's not that far from the truth for some animals. Often what you will have with the vast majority of quadrupeds is something somewhere between these two extremes. Very rarely see an animal that has this perfect sync of front and rear limbs both going in time together, and you also very rarely see any where they are in perfect opposition like this. They're normally somewhere slightly outside of that, perhaps a little bit like this, or a little bit like that perhaps, not uncommon, or perhaps somewhere midway between the two where you've got an overlapping tick-tock like this. Now, of course, you see what I'm doing here, the way that I'm just grabbing the keys on these rear legs and time shifting their cycle to change the sort of phase that we're getting between the leg pairs. And this is one thing that you can do when you've got a quadruped cycle set up. Obviously you wouldn't be doing it with single bones like this, you'd be doing it with, controls for IK feet or whatnot. But the basic principle is the same. When you are trying to work on the timing for a cycle for a quadruped, it is very easy just to grab one pair of legs, grab their main controllers, and just time shift them against the other pair until you fall into exactly the right step. Makes it exceedingly easy to play with your timings and make sure that you get them correct. As for knowing what those timings should be, it does vary from animal to animal. And consequently, this is one of the places where we want to go looking for reference. This is a personal favourite area of mine when I want to look for reference video of animals moving. This is the BBC Natural History section of the Getty Images website. And let's, for instance, take a look here at these elephants, shall we? This is particularly interesting. Notice the timing of their limbs there. They're almost in perfect step. Look, the rear leg goes literally just an instant before the front leg on the same side. Elephants move their left legs both together and their right legs both together. I've seen a number of animations done of elephants where they go left rear, right front, right rear, left front, where they're crossing as we saw in the initial example, the initial timing that we showed on the simple bone setup there. And it's wrong. It's completely wrong. Elephants don't walk like that. They walk like this. Notice as well the specific point of their footfalls. If you watch closely, you will see that the rear foot contacts the ground at the same point where the front foot was previously placed. This is not uncommon in a great many quadrupeds. You get the rear foot falling on the piece of ground where the front foot has lifted up from. Another creature well known to do this is the bear. You'll see that his rear foot lands in the same place where his front foot previously was. One interesting point is that this gives the bear, and the elephant as well, exceedingly odd tracks. You can diagnose an animal's walk, if nothing else, from the tracks that it leaves. In the case of a bear, its front paws are a very distinctly different sort of shape and size to its rear paws. So it creates a composite footprint of both paws when it lands, and because they've landed in the same spot, you don't see 4 separate paw prints, you see 2 paw prints. This is why people in North America see lots of big footprints in the woods. But notice the timing on him as well. He's also got this, bit of a tick-tock going on between, right and left and front and rear. In this case, both limbs on each side aren't moving as much together, somewhat, but not completely. It's not as pronounced as on the elephant. It's almost as if the rear foot comes forward, and the timing of it almost as if it kicks the front foot out the way. It doesn't actually contact it, but the front foot leaves right at the last second before the rear foot touches down there. Again, this gives a very specific signature timing to the movement of this animal and the way that its footfalls work. It's always worth looking close at some of the details as well. For instance, here's a close-up detail of a lion walking along and his paw action. What we can notice here is that you've got this very distinctive little flick that the front paws do as they come over. You saw, of course, the bear doing it as he was walking forwards. His front paws were, pitching down and then flapping up to contact the ground. But if you look at what a cat does, you see that the forearm actually rolls. The paw turns in as it's coming over. This is a very signature move that you see in cats, and the big cats especially. It's most notable, and of course, at its slowest rate. But it's a very signature little detail that you'd want to include in motion for cat-like creatures. Do this on a dog, do this on an elephant, and it will look wrong. If we see here this action for a cheetah, we also see something else that's important, and that is that the pacing and timing between the limbs is also a function of how swiftly the animal is moving. Notice, of course, that when he's just oddly tipping along there, you see that rear leg there, look, see that rear leg comes forward, then bang, after it touches down, or just as it's touching down, off goes the front. You've got this sort of click over timing. See the front paw here, that goes there on the right, then off goes the rear, then the next front, like this. So you've got this one, then the next, then the next, then the next sort of timing, whilst he's not moving very fast. He's just tiptoeing around, as it were. But of course, notice that as he gets into full swing, again, the legs are almost in time with one another. The rear leg is moving just a couple of frames before the front one starts to move. It's almost as if he's moving both left legs, both right legs. It's just a very slight phase offset between them. Whilst we're here, even though we are mainly looking to focus the attention on quadruped cycles there, it's also worth just giving a quick mention to the cycles of animals that have lots of legs. Mostly, of course, that's going to be insects, but the thing that you will notice with those is that every second pair is in time with one another, whilst every other pair is opposed to one another. So you've got what would be the left and right at the front for the quadruped here are in opposition to what would be the left and right for the rear. So their timings run counter to one another, like this. Then the next pair, so the second pair after, or the third pair of legs in this case, are in time with the first pair here. So these guys match up with those guys. Then the next pair after that, these ones here, are timed to that one. So you've just got this running alternation of the leg times as you go back, where they time in with the ones one set removed from them. And this basically is how spider cycles work, and also of course other insects with even more legs, centipede, millipede cycles and so on. If you run this on something that's got a ton of legs and you have them all just clicking over in alternation like this, sometimes with a slight timing offset, per pair as it were, per set of 4, then that's when you start to see those sort of rolling wave-like motions that seem to travel down all of the legs as they go along. So do keep those things in mind as you work on animating different kinds of animals at different kinds of walks. Have a good look around at different pieces of reference so as you can see different walks that different animals adopt in different situations, and from here we'll move on to working with some quadruped cycles.